Next, we'll look at the work of Kevin Beasley, who is a sound and sculpture installation artist based in New York. Kevin did his MFA at Yale as well and graduated in 2012. So he was actually in the same year as Leon Finley. They were classmates. This is a work called A View of a Landscape that is for his first major exhibition at the Whitney Museum of Art in New York. There is this cotton gin motor that Kevin acquired from Maplesville, Alabama, and he drove there from New Haven to meet the owner of this previous plantation and learn more about this cotton gin motor that wasn't working at the time. And actually, he showed this motor in his thesis exhibition, and it wasn't working. It was just kind of sitting there as this dead object. So in this exhibition, this object gets animated through custom microphones, contact mics, microphone stands, cables, etc. And it's encased within, so it's moving and working, and then the sound is getting recorded, and it's encased within this soundproof vitrine. There's another room that becomes a listening room, and this listening room is where sound is then transposed, divorced from the object, and the viewer can kind of then enter that room and hear the kind of animate life of this object. So when you encounter the object at first within this vitrine, it's almost like it's solidified or zombie-like, and then it's being animated by this technology. So it's kind of living and dead at the same time. And then with its sound being completely divorced, you're just kind of looking at its aesthetic, which then becomes strange because it's interesting as a machine, but then also you're confronted by the violence of that history. This work was inspired first by Kevin's travels to visit his family in Virginia. And this is a photograph of, and he went to Virginia kind of every summer in August for a family reunion. And this is an image of his family's property in Virginia, and an image that he took when he first noticed that it was planted with cotton. And, he had this really kind of embodied affective experience encountering this field, though and I'm going to show you a video where he talks about this, but it's this plant, but also it has this history. And then what does it mean for him, as an African-American man to then be encountering this plant in this time, and what are the kind of politics of that? And it also reveals the ways in which there are triggers that take you back to to this history, or to a history of trauma. So to process this kind of experience, he started doing performances on his family's 9-acre property. So these are 2 mics and a laptop, and he was doing these field recording projects. There's a recorder there as well. And he was doing these projects and realizing that, the sound recordings that he was getting, he couldn't really tell the difference between sound in Virginia, that soundscape, and then the soundscape in New Haven, where he was coming from, where Yale is located. And then he realized that he was, he started performing within these landscapes and, recording the sound of his body. So he thought, well, it's my body that's missing. And this was kind of not a failed experiment, but this was kind of part of the research that informed this later project, A View of a Landscape. So this is just I'm showing you his research process. I guess I want to emphasize here the thingly quality that Kevin is trying to materialize in the reworking of this object. So he's thinking about, what does it mean to take an object that has this kind of really intense, traumatic, violent, powerful history, and it's an archive of that history, and then remake it, like his agency in kind of remaking it as an object, and then making it kind of sound in a different way. So as the sound was being projected into this listening room, Kevin invited a number of performers to and DJs and sound artists to reinterpret that sound. And then he also did a performance with Ralph Lemon, another choreographer and performance artist, where he used turntables and mixing boards to recalibrate, reinterpret that sound to make it something new. So he's almost like metabolizing or digesting that history through his body and then making it into something else. So there's this paradox of this kind of confrontation with this violent history, and then also his agency in kind of reinterpreting that history. Part of this exhibition is also, at the Whitney, is also these kind of slabs that he makes using clothing that he's worn, cotton that's sourced from Virginia, objects, technology. So it's like the refuse of capitalism, plus his body that is both materially present and also absent. So you see the kind of two hooded figures. So they're the kind of specters of this history. And the work, these slabs are so kind of luscious and like materially and tactile and engaging. But then you're kind of, you look at the material list and you're also confronted with this really, this violent history of chattel slavery in the United States. And so now I'm going to show a video of Kevin. Oh, this is a detail here. So he's really kind of incorporating his objects. And how this is made is it's dipped in resin, smooth cast 326, and then it's kind of laid within this cast framed box, and then layered and layered and layered until it builds up a surface. So you can, if you think about the archive and even like the sedimentation of history, it kind of mirrors the layers of soil and layers of the land, except it's like refuse. Now I'm going to show a video in which Kevin talks about this process, and it's a little bit long, so but I want to show the whole thing, so please bear with me.